Have you ever noticed that the harder you try to be nice and please everyone, the less people actually respect you? Carl Jung explained exactly why this happens, and the answer surprises almost everyone who hears it for the first time. It happens because you are hiding your shadow. And what most people get completely wrong is assuming that facing this hidden part of yourself will make you worse, more dangerous, less likable. The truth is the opposite. Integrating your shadow does not turn you into a bad person. It turns you into someone magnetic, someone people instinctively respect, someone who can no longer be quietly used or dismissed. Today, we're going to look at exactly why that is and what you can start doing about it right now. To understand this, you have to understand two concepts Jung spent his life mapping out: the persona and the shadow. The persona is the mask, the socially acceptable version of yourself that you present to the world. It's the polite version, the agreeable version, the one who says yes, who smooths things over, who never causes friction. Most people believe that the more polished this mask is, the more they will be liked and respected. But Jung discovered something almost every human instinct already senses without being able to name it. A persona that is too perfect, too consistently nice, too carefully agreeable, starts to feel false. Not necessarily consciously, but somewhere underneath conscious awareness, people can feel that something is missing, that there is no real edge, no resistance, nothing solid behind the smile. And that missing solidity is the shadow, the part of you that has been pushed down, hidden, and denied. The shadow is everything the persona was built to cover up. The anger you were taught not to express, the ambition that felt too aggressive to show, the desire to say no when everyone expected a yes, the parts of you that are messy, demanding, occasionally selfish, capable of real confrontation instead of quiet accommodation. Most people spend their whole lives keeping this side buried, convinced that if it ever surfaced, they would become cruel or unlikable or dangerous. So, they overcorrect. They become excessively kind, excessively agreeable, excessively easy to be around. And here's the part that stings. Excessive kindness, when it comes from suppression rather than genuine strength, does not read as virtue to other people's instincts. It reads as weakness. It signals that there is no boundary to bump into, no cost to taking advantage, nothing underneath the pleasant surface that will ever push back. And people, often without meaning to, treat that kind of person accordingly, not out of cruelty, but because the unconscious mind reads the absence of resistance as the absence of value. This is why so many genuinely kind, genuinely giving people end up feeling invisible, or used, or quietly disrespected, no matter how much they give. It isn't that kindness itself is the problem. It's that kindness without any shadow behind it. Kindness with no capacity for a real no real anger, no real limit, feels hollow to the people receiving it. It's a mask with nothing solid holding it up. And on some level, everyone can sense the difference between a boundary that exists and a boundary that has simply never been tested because there was never anything there to push against in the first place. This is where Jung's real insight becomes uncomfortable, and also where it becomes genuinely useful. He said something that still unsettles people today. No one can be good if they are not also capable of being bad. This is not permission to become cruel. It's a statement about wholeness. A person who has never touched their own capacity for anger cannot truly offer forgiveness because there was never anything to forgive. A person who has never faced their own selfishness cannot truly choose generosity because they never had another option. Real goodness, the kind that actually earns respect, comes from someone who has access to their full range, including the parts that could push back, and chooses restraint anyway. That choice is what makes kindness meaningful instead of automatic. Automatic kindness, the kind that comes from someone who literally cannot say no, isn't a virtue. It's a limitation wearing a virtue's clothing. So what does it actually look like to integrate the shadow instead of hiding it? It does not mean becoming aggressive, unpredictable, or intentionally difficult. That would just be swapping one mask for another. trading the persona of endless agreeableness for a persona of hardness, which is just as false and just as exhausting to maintain. Integration means something quieter and far more demanding. It means becoming aware of the parts of yourself you've been suppressing, acknowledging that they exist, and then choosing consciously when and how to let them show, instead of denying them completely or letting them leak out sideways in passive aggression, resentment, or sudden uncharacteristic outbursts that confuse everyone, including yourself. Here is a practical way to start noticing your own shadow today. And it comes directly from something Jung considered one of the most reliable diagnostic tools available to anyone willing to use it honestly. Pay close attention to what irritates you in other people, especially the irritation that feels disproportionate to what's actually happening. If someone's arrogance makes you unreasonably furious, it's worth asking whether you have buried some version of confidence in yourself that you were taught was arrogant and unacceptable to show. If someone's bluntness bothers you far more than it should, it's worth asking whether you have a suppressed desire to speak your own mind without softening every sentence. This is not a coincidence. Jung believed that the traits which provoke the strongest reactions in us are very often the exact traits we have exiled from our own self-image, then unconsciously project onto others so we don't have to look at them in ourselves. The first step, then, is simply observation without judgment. For the next few days, notice the moments you feel irrationally annoyed, offended, or triggered by someone else's behavior. And instead of immediately deciding they're the problem, ask a quieter question. Is there a version of this quality living somewhere inside me that I've never allowed myself to express? You don't have to act on the answer immediately. You just have to let yourself see it honestly, without flinching away from it the way you probably have your whole life. The second step is learning to tolerate the discomfort of a small, real no. Most people who struggle with this have spent years automatically saying yes to avoid conflict, disappointment, or the discomfort of someone else's reaction. Start small. Find one low-stakes situation this week where your honest answer is no, and say it plainly, without over-explaining, without apologizing 3 times, without softening it into something so vague it doesn't actually function as a boundary. Notice how uncomfortable this feels. That discomfort is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's the exact resistance that has been missing from your persona. And every time you practice it, you build a small amount of the solidity that other people's instincts are unconsciously looking for. The third step is allowing yourself to feel your less flattering emotions fully, in private before deciding what to do with them. Anger, envy, competitiveness, the desire to be seen and acknowledged instead of quietly overlooked. These are not signs that something is wrong with you. They're simply parts of the shadow that have been exiled for so long that even feeling them privately can seem alarming. Give yourself permission to notice them without immediately suppressing them or acting them out. Sit with the anger for a moment instead of swallowing it. Acknowledge the envy instead of pretending you don't feel it. This alone starts to change the internal relationship you have with these parts of yourself, from one of denial to one of ownership. And ownership is what eventually allows you to choose your response instead of being unconsciously run by whatever you've refused to look at. What tends to happen when people actually practice this, even imperfectly, is that their presence changes in a way other people notice before they can even explain why. They stop feeling like a frictionless surface anyone can walk over. They start feeling, in a way that's hard to put into words, like someone who is actually there, someone with an interior, someone whose kindness means something because it isn't the only option available to them. This is not about becoming colder or less generous. It's about generosity finally coming from strength instead of fear. And people can feel that difference even when they can't articulate it. So here's the real question worth sitting with after all of this. What trait in other people irritates you the most? The kind of irritation that feels a little too big for the situation. Think about it honestly for a second, because that reaction is very likely the clearest trail leading straight to your own shadow. Drop it in the comments below, whatever it is, and let's actually look at it together. Because naming it out loud is often the first real step toward integrating it, instead of continuing to carry it in silence.